The Big Apple Coffee Party is a group of local activists, all volunteer. It's a nonpartisan group that is issue-oriented. So I wanted to introduce our great friend, Zephyr Teachout. She has been a great friend of the Big Apple Coffee Party for a long time. She was on our very first panel, Should Corporations Decide Our Elections, which we held here at All Souls. She is an expert on constitutional law. She has been galvanizing the public through running for office and through her taking charge of Mayday PAC. And I want to hand over the podium to Zephyr Teachout.
We are at this incredibly serious constitutional moment. And the TPP threatens not just individual policies, but actually the shape of power in our country and the shape of power in our world. It is essential that we all educate ourselves, not just for ourselves, but each one of you knows people who can go out and explain what is happening with the TPP. If there is a risk in the TPP, and there are many, one is that it is given to the experts to decide. There's a priestly quality to the debate about the TPP that only the priests understand, and we should trust them. But instead, we must educate ourselves. We're going to hear from Lori Wallach, Margaret Flowers, Kevin Zeese, and Jim Hightower, and I'll introduce each of them in turn, and they each bring something different. Lori Wallach is the reason that we almost defeated Fast Track and that we can defeat the TPP. She's the director of Public Citizens Global Trade Watch. You might have read about her in the New York Times or several other places. But Wall Street Journal called her trade debates guerrilla warrior.
The fights that have happened because of my colleagues here, because our colleagues all around the world in the same fight, and because of all of you. And that is actually the story of how we're going to stop the TPP, which is totally doable, actually. The one thing about that agreement, especially now that we've actually seen the text, and we can see how really heinous it is it's a major overreach. It is so beyond the pale that actually we have the ability to put together the biggest coalition ever. Because almost every goal, not just of progressive people, but of people who would not even identify themselves on the political spectrum, but who just care about having a decent standard of living and having a good job, who care about making sure their kids' food is safe, who have a granny who has medicine and it's expensive, who have a notion, whether conservative or progressive, that they should make the decisions that affect our lives, and those shouldn't be sent away to some unaccountable system. All of those goals and values are just kind of American values, but frankly, they're the values of most of the people in the other countries in the TPP. Those values are all insulted, trampled, ripped to smithereens in this agreement. And in a very systematic way, it is a handful of very large corporate interests that would benefit from this agreement against all of us. And that is the scariest thing about this agreement, but that is also the power we have to win. So part of what I'm going to talk about what's in the agreement, I'm going to talk about in the context of how all of us can be helping to educate other people. There are two pieces of business about how we're going to stop the TPP. There's a very specific set of members of Congress who are going to make that decision. The work done across this country almost meant Fast Track was defeated. It's a very close vote. There are very few votes that have to be turned, and there's no TPP. So there's a very specific list of members in the House of Representatives who are going to have to vote no. Then there is making sure we get the public to understand what the TPP means as far as the disaster going forward, so those members of Congress feel the necessity to do that thing, vote against it. And that's a much broader public education campaign. And so whether or not you live in the district of one of the targeted members of Congress in New York, we all need desperately to educate our colleagues, our friends, our families, our enemies, our neighbors. Anyone we run into, we can think of a way to bring it up, because this really is one of those moments where it's kind of a point of no return. If we go down that TPP road, it is, without exaggeration, a very scary and bad place that is going to be very hard to get back from. So why do I say that? This is an agreement that for 7+ years has been negotiated in secrecy with more than 500 official trade advisors representing corporations. In that time, we, the public, as well as the press, and most of the time Congress, that has constitutional authority over trade, though that's not mainly what this agreement's about, have been locked out. As a result, we have a 30-chapter agreement that has 1,200 pages of law, plus another 5,000 pages of details, exceptions, and schedules of commitments, that of those 30 chapters, 6 of them have anything to do with trade. All those other chapters basically rewrite wide swaths of our domestic laws, the things that we think we decide in city councils and state legislatures and Congress and our courts domestically. And this set of rules would be put into place in a sort of slow-motion coup d'etat via trade agreement. Because you know, all smart people are for free trade. But that's not what the TPP is. It's a delivery mechanism for an entirely different agenda that is not good for people or the planet. And why do I say that? We knew from leaks already that, number one, the TPP will offshore more American jobs. How can I say that with certainty? Because the text leak that showed, it's still there, we have a final text now, but early on already was agreed, the investment rules that incentivize offshoring. They make it cheaper and easier to relocate jobs from the United States and other countries where generations of folks have struggled to have higher wages, to have the worker safety and environmental standards, and take them to places where people don't have those rights, where wages are low. And in the case of the TPP, we have the low-wage alternative for offshoring to China, Vietnam. So number two, the TPP will bring down American wages. There's a whole batch of economists, including many of those who supported NAFTA, who will just fess up and say that. Why? It's basic market economics. We're going to have Americans directly competing with workers in Vietnam who make 65 cents an hour. 65 cents an hour. And with those investment rules, it's cheap, it's safe, it's actually subsidized if the US firms move the jobs there. So you saw what happened during NAFTA. In Mexico, wages were about $10, $12 a day. So this is half the China wage. The third thing we know is we're going to get flooded with unsafe imported food. Why do we know that? Because actually the trade representative admitted that they were putting into place new rules to allow imports of food that didn't meet our domestic standards. And this is a very big deal with the TPP because amongst the countries are Malaysia and Vietnam, who are some of the biggest importers of shrimp. These are farmed shrimp. These are shrimp that are farmed in conditions that you really would not find sanitary or safe. And because, among other things, human and animal waste is used to fertilize the ponds, then tons of antibiotics are chucked in afterwards. So you basically have antibiotic marinated poop shrimp. There's just no other way to put it. And right now, we stop a lot of that. Only 1% of the shrimp is inspected coming into the US. It's disgusting but true, but they sample according to where there are troubles. And Vietnam and Malaysia get way oversampled, except the TPP has a provision saying you can challenge the sampling decisions of border inspection as unfair because you're discriminating against a country. Well, you discriminate against the ones that have a problem. That's how you use the resources. Ixnay under TPP. Bon appetit. The fourth thing that we know is that the TPP will raise our medicine prices. There have been leaks of that chapter on patents, but now we have finals on both patents and a provision that would allow challenges to Medicare bulk purchasing and formulary pricing. So the patent chapter basically even rolls back some of the reforms that George Bush made under duress from the Democrats in Congress for his last trade agreements. It would allow monopoly extensions for what is called evergreening. So like, for instance, you can get a 20-year monopoly right to sell a medicine and charge whatever the hell you want. But then when that 20 years is up, you get generic competition. As we all know, price goes way down. Except under TPP, every signatory country has to do things like have a new 20-year monopoly for a second use. So like, here's just my favorite example. You know, Viagra was made as a hair-growing tonic. That had that other effect that they found out later by accident. So you would have 40 years of monopoly, say, on that drug. You got the hair version, and then if you don't find out about the other use for another 20 years, you get another 20 years. It's the same chemical compound. It's doubling the length. As well, new exclusivity on the cutting-edge biologic drugs. The cutting-edge drugs are actually really life-saving potential cures for cancer. Already ridiculously expensive. Many of the countries in TPP have no exclusivity rules. This would have at least 5 years, maybe 8, where again, there'd be no competition, prices would be sky high. These are provisions that are going to kill people. In the developing country, TPP members, these are provisions that will kill people. They have access to medicine now, they will not in the future. This is a choice. In our country, what it means, those provisions, but also the rules that allow the pharmaceutical companies to challenge the formulary, the purchasing decisions of Medicare, Medicaid, etc., means higher prices, more people in this country not able to get access to medicine, and also unneeded expenditures of government money that should go into building infrastructure, creating hospitals, creating jobs here, taking care of the environment. Instead, we'll be giving it to the pharmaceutical companies through the various government programs that provide medicine to elderly and the needy. And if all of that weren't enough, we know that the TPP includes countries with notoriously horrible human rights practices. So you've got Brunei, where in 3 years, when the law is fully implemented that was adopted a year and a half ago, it will be the law to stone LGBTQ individuals. Yes, gay people would get stoned, as would single mothers and adulterers. And you have Malaysia, which is one of the worst traffickers in human beings, modern-day slavery, in the world. And we all have seen the horrible exposés of the slave camps in the jungle, particularly focusing on refugees from Myanmar. And you have, in this mix, absolutely no human rights standards. So sadly, peculiarly, perversely, the administration says, this is a 21st century agreement. But you know something? The Washington Post did us all a great service. They made the entire text word searchable. So search the word climate. That's a damn 21st century problem. Does not show up in this agreement. Seriously, does not show up. There are rules that would forbid us from ever banning the export of liquid natural gas or managing a lot of our energy policies, but the word climate doesn't appear. The word human rights does not appear. And in addition, we have in many ways an agreement that's worse, perversely, than the previous agreements that Bush had negotiated. Not just is the intellectual property chapter a rollback, but also the environment chapter whacks 7 of the 8 agreements that provide the environmental standards for the enforcement of standards on the environment in the environmental standards chapter, which is to say there were 8 of these agreements that were enforceable. Now, there will be 1 that is enforceable. That is the standard that theoretically is the environmental standard the agreement is supposed to hold countries to. How that happened, unclear. But all of the new conservation standards that are being touted, the standard there is countries shall endeavor to combat. Endeavor to combat means, for instance, what's the exact language for the wildlife provision? Endeavor to combat means if you put up a poster saying, do not trade in medicinal animal parts, you have endeavored to combat. It does not ban the trade in these goods. It does not ban the particular practices. And then, believe it or not, there are new rules that would limit internet freedom and roll back our rights to use the internet without interference, but also without basically having governments forced to be internet cops and shut us down, knock us out. These were not in past agreements. And then if all that weren't enough, shockingly, they expanded the investor-state dispute settlement system, the system that lets individual corporations be elevated to the same level as an entire sovereign government, skirt domestic courts and laws, and sue our governments in front of extrajudicial tribunals staffed by 3 private sector attorneys who rotate between being the judge and representing the corporations attacking the governments. These tribunals under the TPP still have no conflict of interest rules, still allow the rotating, still have no limits on how much taxpayer money can be ordered to compensate said companies, and if all that weren't enough, 9,200 additional corporations would be explicitly authorized to use the investor-state system against the US. Because up until now, our trade agreements with investor-state have been with developing countries who don't have a lot of investors here. All of the Japanese and Australian and other companies, of which there are almost 10,000, almost as many as we right now face liability under investor-state in one fell swoop, would be added. And these are big companies, including about 10 of the world's 30 largest banks, which gets to the latest thing. They expanded investor-state to allow a tax on financial stability measures. Yes, after the global financial crisis, one of the places where TPP is worse than any past agreement is in opening an entire box of Pandoras on our financial stability laws. Now, that everyone is unhappy, mortified, infuriated, and otherwise ready to do something about this. Let me just conclude by saying that grim reality is only ours if Congress approves that very, very bad agreement. And that can only happen if we all don't do our job. Because literally, this is an agreement that if people are aware of what's in there, in black and white, not made up, and what it means for their lives and their futures, we will build a majority in Congress against. The reason I say if Congress doesn't go for it, literally the agreement's terms and accessions say, if the US and Japan don't approve it, the thing tanks. So we have in our hands, and frankly our brothers and sisters in the other TPP countries now relying on us, because it ain't happening in Japan. It's a parliamentary system. They do not have the ability we do to organize a member of Congress one by one to stand up and vote their constituent against the president. Their prime minister is the majority party in the parliament. They're not stopping it. It's on us. So if Congress, the House, a majority, we do our work, says no, we can stop the TPP future, and it's on us. This 90 days notice everyone heard about is the right to sign it. The thing can be signed as of the first week of February, but they will only push for a vote if they think they have the vote. So if we do our work now, when the administration is looking to lock down the yes votes, we have to now make a fuss, now get commitments from our members of Congress to vote no. We will make sure actually that they don't have a vote, not next year, not in the lame duck, not in the year after. If the thing is not passable, the thing is finished. And for everyone who wants to dig in, and I hope it's everyone in this room, and you're going to feel even more motivated by the time you hear from my colleagues, there are great materials to get involved, the details of what I've talked about, long analysis, talking points, how to do a member of Congress meeting, letters theater, simple op-eds, you name it, at tradewatch.org, and exposethetpp.org. And hopefully you can, those addresses are in here, you can look at sort of some of the top line arguments, because the first piece of business is to think here before you leave tonight, what 5 people are you going to tell about this tomorrow? And aim them at your congressperson. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Margaret Flowers, who is a pediatrician, or was a pediatrician.
I'm still one, just not practicing.
Still a non-practicing pediatrician.
I'm practicing political medicine.
And yes, she's now running for U.S. Senate in Maryland. She's been a leading advocate for single-payer health care. And she is a co-director of Popular Resistance, which is an organization some of you may have heard of and has been doing a lot of the leadership around organizing in this area and others. So thank you, Margaret.
Good evening. It's great to be here. Tough act to follow. We're very lucky to have Lori and all of her knowledge and expertise that's really guided this fight. And so for us at Popular Resistance, we created Popular Resistance because there is a vibrant movement in the United States of people that are standing up and taking action, but it's just, we don't see it in the commercial media. So we felt like there needed to be a place where people could go and see that there are a lot of people standing up. And the fight that I was engaged in for single payer taught me that we're not going to win based on one issue, right? We're not going to go out there and fight for single payer and have enough people to win single payer, that all of the things that we're fighting for are all connected. And so we need to join our forces together. And if there is one thing right now that joins us all together and that's critical that we fight, it's the Trans-Pacific Partnership, because it impacts everything that we care about. And we can stop it if we rise up together and take action. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about why, Lori gave you some great points, but why this really needs to come home to us, to understand that this thing that's out there, this trade agreement, this corporate power grab that seems like it's so far out there, actually impacts us directly. So Kevin and I just recently wrote an article called something like the 10 Shocking Realities of the TPP, based on what we were seeing come out of the text after it was released. And I thought maybe I'd do this like David Letterman, like 10 top reasons. And then I realized I wasn't that clever. And that 10 is a really lot of things to remember, so I broke it down to 3. So the first thing, as Lori alluded to, is that this 21st century agreement is a bigger overreach than even President Bush went for in past trade agreements. loosening the protections that we have, environmental, labor, those types of things. It impacts even like our struggle to get health care, to get a single-payer health care system in this country. The attack is on anything that has any type of government advantage or a state-owned enterprise is going to have to go head-to-head with private corporations. So any advantages that we might give to a single-payer system or a public health care system, we have to allow the private to have those same advantages. So it's really going to stop our single-payer fight dead in its track. And that reason alone is why I fight for to get rid of the TPP. Lori talked about lowering the wages. There's something in the TPP that I think is new, and that is that we're going to see outsourcing, not just outsourcing of our jobs to other countries. We're going to see kind of this internal outsourcing, where foreign corporations who have operations here in the United States can bring in their own workers from their countries and pay them at the wages that they would pay in their country, not at U.S. wages. So we're going to see this race to the bottom. Yeah, what? Like these things are like, yeah, what? The other thing is that it bans Buy America at the federal level. So when we say we're going to do like a major green energy transformation, green energy works program, and we're going to create solar panels and windmills and things like that, we can't give preference to U.S. manufacturers of those things. What they also included in here is a path towards developing Ban America at the local level. So it will actually impact our procurement at the local level as well down the road. So that's number one. It's rolling back these protections that we've had before, even more than we've had. The second thing is the corporate courts, and Lori did a really great job of explaining that. But one of the points that really comes home to me is that the lawyers who serve as judges on these corporate courts can play dual roles. So they can leave their corporation and go serve as a judge in one case, make a ruling, maybe set a new precedent. Then they can go back to their job as a corporate judge, a corporate lawyer, and they can bring a case before the tribunal as a lawyer. So what do you think they're going to do? They're going to think, wow, I really need this precedent set so I can, make this advance in this other case. So it's really unethical, and there are no ethical codes in it. The third thing that I think is really critical to understand with the Paris talks that are coming up in December with the United Nations COP21 Paris Treaty is that treaty is going to be a non-binding agreement. The Trans-Pacific Partnership is going to be a binding agreement. So anything that they put in the COP21 non-binding is superseded by what's in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and it is going to be driving more extreme extraction of fossil fuels and export of those from the United States. So those are three things I think that are really critical. So what are we going to do about it? So we have beat back these types of agreements before, the multilateral agreement on investments, the free trade area of the Americas. Those were beaten back. We, through the fast track fight, we collectively created this movement of movement. People who care about healthcare or food safety or the environment or labors or internet or corporate power or financial overreach. All these people have been coming together and fighting, and we held off fast track for a long time. We pushed this fight into an election year, and that in itself is incredible. We should really give ourselves a hand for doing that. So now we have this really strong base. They were just able to squeak by fast track by twisting arms and making promises. And so we have this very strong base that we can build off. And the one thing we learned in the fast track fight was that we did a great job, but we're going to need to do just a little bit more. We're going to need to escalate our actions. And so that's why I'm excited about the upcoming actions that we have actually starting this Saturday. If you haven't heard, we call it the Fall Rising. It's a mobilization to stop the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's happening in Washington, D.C. If you can make it down there, that would be fantastic. We have flyers on the table back here with a schedule. There is a van that's being rented to bring 15 people down, and I think they still have some spaces. And we also received a donation today, a very generous donation, so that we can provide stipends for people who want to take a bus down to D.C. for this mobilization. Some of the reasons for this mobilization, why it's so important, are that we need to increase our skills. And so to do that, we're going to spend the weekend training and preparing, learning how to make spectacle creative art, learning how to do direct action, and that in direct action, there are a lot of different roles. You don't have to be the one that's doing the sit-in or the die-in or whatever. There are a lot of support roles that are involved in that as well. So we're going to increase our skills over this weekend. And then we're going to go and hit the streets on Monday morning, and we're going to do 3 days of direct action, rallies, and marches in Washington, D.C. The purpose of that is to raise awareness. There's still a lot of people that don't know what's going on. And so these actions, we hope, will get out and spread out into the broader public. But it's also to start also flexing our muscle for when this agreement gets into Congress, because we're going to have to escalate again. So I encourage you to get involved in that fall mobilization if you can in any way. If you can come down, that's great. If you can't, we've got ways that people can participate remotely, as well as you can organize your own action. Our action calendar is filling up with local action, so if you want to do something here, that would be really great. There's other things that we need to do in this fight as well, beyond that. And actually, congratulations again, New York, because you passed a resolution in your city council. So that's awesome. Yeah. Cities and towns across the country are revving up again to pass TPP free zone resolutions. And so that's going to be another critical piece. If you know people in other cities, other states, reach out to them, encourage them to get involved, because this is a great way to organize locally. It's a way to build a coalition locally of people, teach them about how this is going to impact them right at their city level, go to your city or county and get them, your council, to pass a resolution against the TPP. Because what we're trying to do is really create a political culture where people are so aware and so refusing to obey this that members of Congress are not going to feel that it's safe for them to vote for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to change this political culture. And then the other piece that's really critically important is getting out the message. We've already seen, if you look at the U.S. Trade Rep website, have you seen these little memes that they've made about how great it is for enforcing, environmental protection or providing good jobs? We need to counter that misinformation, that propaganda. And so we've created a team called the Media Mobilizers. And if you go to flushthetpp.org, which is our campaign website, it's Flush the TPP, because people couldn't remember when we first started doing this what the initials were, so we just started calling it Toilet Paper Plus. We used a lot of imagery that was related to toilets, and that seemed to get it to stick. So if you go to flushthetpp.org and you click on the tools for media, you can sign up to be a media mobilizer. And basically what we're asking people to do is each day we send out an email with some key updated information about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and then you have at it. You can use that to post on your Facebook page. You can send an email blast out to your friends and family. If you tweet, you can tweet about it. If you are comfortable with writing letters to the editor, you can write letters to the editor about it, whatever you need to do. But what we're trying to do is create this wave of citizens media that's going to overcome the misinformation and the commercial media and get the word out. And we did that before. We did that when they were first brought the Trans-Pacific Partnership, started negotiating it. There was a real media blackout on it. And we were able to overcome that media blackout through the citizens media. So we need to do that again more than ever, because we know that it's going to be a very strong push of misinformation out there. So I'm just going to leave you with, this is a really critical fight. It's going to set back everything that we've been fighting for if this goes through. But we can beat it. We're building a movement of movements. We're changing the political culture. It's going to have widespread ramifications on everything that we care about, because as we build this movement, we can continue to push forward and push for the real solutions that the majority of us want to see happen, and that Congress is not going in the right direction on, but as we make this wave of change, we'll change that too. So thanks very much.
Next up, we have Kevin Zeese. I think I met you in 2009
That's right.
through,
Thank you.
we were trying to break up big banks. Kevin is an extraordinary organizer, a lawyer, also a co-director of Popular Resistance. His leadership, and along with Margaret and others, in the net neutrality fight was really critical. With net neutrality, Kevin led some of the organizing, occupying the FCC, and these are commissioners who aren't used to getting this kind of personal attention. I sometimes think that we're in this moment of a sleeping giant waking up with like one paw being net neutrality and one paw being Black Lives Matter and one leg being the TPP. Kevin's involved in all of it, so I want to hear what you're saying.
Well, my job is to put this into a larger context and to really show that this is part of kind of the battle of our times, the epic battle of whether we're going to have democracy where people rule or corporate government where the transnational corporations rule. That is the battle. And there's many fronts to that. We see it in the elections with such a small percentage of people funding elections. We see it with Citizens United. We see it across the globe. We saw it in Greece when the bankers insisted Greece get down to its knees and grovel and live a stranded life without a real democracy. Despite their vote, they were ignored. So we see this battle happening all over the world and all over the country. And the TPP is relevant to that, and these two other trade agreements I'll talk about briefly that President Obama has also been negotiating, is relevant to that because it really undermines what little democracy we have left. If we lose this battle to stop the TPP, we see all three branches of government hurt significantly. And it's interesting, during the fast track debate, when we actually were kind of occupying Capitol Hill too. We had a little encampment up there as well. We had to we weren't allowed to sleep though, so we had to take rotational shifts, although some people did sleep. I think under the table or something. But while that battle was going on, one of the issues that President Obama was misleading us about was that this will not affect legislation. It's not going to change things. And during that, while it was going on, the WTO was ruling against the United States in a trade tribunal fight over a COOL, country of origin labeling. A very popular law. People want to know where their food comes from. They don't want to, as Laurie was talking about, the shrimp cesspools that shrimp grow up in. We don't want to have that in our food. And the United States was losing that. And they were basically told, you're going to get big fines unless you repeal that law. And so what did Congress do? In the midst of fast track, they repeal the law, and Obama signs it, and he still says it doesn't affect our legislation. So Congress and the executive are crippled by that. The reality is that any law passed in the public interest, whether it's to protect the people, whether to protect workers, the planet, climate change, any law passed for those kinds of purposes is open to challenge by foreign corporations, by investors. That's what the investors are foreign corporations. Of course, domestic corporations don't have that right, so already domestic corporations that are at a disadvantage. Of course, communities don't have that right to sue if a foreign corporation comes in and pollutes a community. Consumers don't have that if we're poisoned by Vietnamese shrimp. Unions don't have it if their unions are destroyed. Workers don't have it if their wages go down. We have no rights. Only the corporations and the government have the rights to use these tribunals. It's unlike the federal court system, where the federal court system, a single person can sue a corporation. They can get a lawyer based on a contingency fee, so it costs them nothing unless they win. We get a jury of our peers. We get a real judge, not a rotating corporate lawyer. And unfortunately, the federal court system gets weakened because of these trade tribunals, these investor-state dispute panels. And of course, there's no appeal from those trade tribunal decisions. So we are stuck with them. So all three branches of government get weakened. Our democracy gets weakened, our sovereignty gets weakened, the corporations all get stronger. And this comes at a time when it's being recognized that we may not even be a democracy any longer. I always call it a mirage democracy with managed elections, because the management ensures that Wall Street has two candidates and no one else is really allowed to compete. They can get on the ballot. In some states, they struggle for a hard time to get a third party getting on the ballot, but the corporate media won't cover them. The money that pollutes our elections won't be coming to them. And so we really have a kind of a fake democracy. And people, in fact, researchers now from multiple universities have done various research projects that prove we're an oligarchy more than we're a democracy. We have Supreme Court judges, we have former presidents, we have Jimmy Carter, we have senators like Dick Durbin saying that there's no democratic legitimacy anymore. That's pretty serious stuff. And here we are now facing this to drive that down further. And to drive wages down further at a time when 51% of working Americans are earning $30,000 a year or less. Now we have to compete with, Vietnam 65 cents and Peru's $1.50 an hour. Workers cannot survive that, and that's what we're going into with these corporate trade agreements. And it also has to be put in the context of the global battle that the United States is engaged in for hegemony of the world, to be the sole power. It's not a coincidence that TPP is being negotiated at the same time that we are shifting 52% of our Navy over to the Asian Pacific and the Asian pivot. It's not a coincidence that we are negotiating the transatlantic agreement at the same time that NATO is ringing Russia with military bases and with missiles pointed at Moscow. This is part of a much bigger issue, and there are 3 trade agreements, as I mentioned earlier. There's the one we're talking about tonight, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. There's also the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which is with Europe. And the other one that's least talked about, the TISA agreement, which deals with services, which is 80% of our economy. 50 nations are part of TISA. So this is a web of corporate law written by the corporations and for the corporations. And if this is allowed to be put into place, it's going to be a multi-generational effort to correct this mistake. It's going to be the battle of the century. We're already in this battle. If we stop it now, it has a totally different impact. If we stop the TPP, it's very unlikely the transatlantic, which is having troubles already in Europe, it's very unlikely TISA will get forward. Winning this conflict now, this political conflict now, has the potential impact to stop all 3 of these treaties. And it's not alone. Another thing I want to mention, and you can Google this if you want, because I don't want to go into it in great detail now, don't have the time, but out of the World Economic Forum comes this Global Redesign Initiative. Has anyone heard of the Global Redesign Initiative? Just curious. That's the same response we got 4 years ago when we asked, has anyone heard of the TPP? They're good at hiding stuff. They're good at hiding stuff. Of course, now if I ask anyone who's heard of the TPP, everybody's hands goes up, right? So we gradually learn it. But if you Google the Global Redesign Project, Mark and I we have a radio show, we did an hour-long interview with 2 academics from Boston who've done a deep investigation of this, have put out a report going through the Global Redesign Initiative. What it basically is the elites working to minimize the nation state. They believe nation states are kind of slow and they're bureaucratic and they can't make decisions, and corporations are much more efficient. They can make decisions. They can get things done. They can move to where the cheaper workers are, move to where the cheaper resources are, much more efficient for our economy. And they want to turn the UN into a hybrid corporate nation body. So that's just some of it. I'm not going further into it. If you want to go to our radio show, click clearingthefog.radio.org. FOG, by the way, stands for Forces of Greed. Clearing the Fog Radio, and look up the Global Redesign Initiative. You can hear an hour discussion of that by the 2 people in the United States who know most about it. But that's also part of this overall conflict we're in of people, power versus corporate power. And that is the issue of our era. Now, I just want to say on the Trade and Services Agreement, TISA, that this one has some far-reaching effects. I said 80% of the U.S. economy. And of course, this hasn't been seen yet. There's been leaks, thanks to WikiLeaks, but we haven't really seen this yet. So but we know how these trade agreements go and what direction they're trying to move things. And really, all 3 of these trade agreements have one thing in common: privatization, commodification. Minimize state-supported, state-owned enterprises, move away from public good to private profit. And that's really what the TISA is going to do. Postal Service, already under great stress by a Congress that's trying to destroy it and privatize it. People maybe know about this law that was passed to supposedly modernize the Postal Service, where they got this crazy requirement that they have to pay the health care benefits for retired postal workers 75 years in advance. So postal workers have not been born yet, and the Postal Service is stuck creating a fund for postal workers that are going to retire 75 years from now. No other corporation, no other agency's ever had that kind of requirement. What's that designed for? That's designed to fatten the calf. So when Office Depot or Staples or Federal Express or UPS or some new corporation takes it over, they will have a massive amount of money to spend, and of course they won't be required to keep that for health benefits for 70 pensioners in the future. They'll be able to spend it however they want. But that's what the kind of trade and service agreement is going to try to do. Push us. They have a one-way street, trade and services, toward privatization. And once you go to privatization, you can't go back. That's what the agreement is trying to do. So this is really a corporate coup d'etat. All these three agreements, the triad agreements that Obama has been pushing and negotiating in secret. Thankfully, there are some leaks that come out in the process, and because of the fast-track fight, we're able to read the TPP now. They didn't want to let us see it now, by the way. That was a compromise they made in order to pass the fast track through Congress. We wouldn't be reading it now if it hadn't been for that. So, unless, of course, there were more leaks. But that was because there was a successful, aggressive fast-track fight. While we didn't stop fast-track, we certainly opened the doors up. Now we know what we're dealing with. So we're in this crossroads moment. Crossroads moment that will affect our children and grandchildren, that will affect our daily lives, that we must fight to win. And it's this moment of transformation. Is it going to be a future where we regain our power, build our power, move toward a real people-powered democracy? Or is it going to be a future where the corporations have a noose around our neck and control every aspect of our lives? That's what we're fighting. And it means that as this happens, we need to rise. We need to rise strong. We need to rise with confidence that we can win, because we can win. Despite the oligarch nature of our government, we've pushed this into an election year. That makes it much harder for them, makes it a better position for us. And so we can win this. I urge all of you to make this your top priority for the next 6 months, and if it takes longer, the next year and a half. If we win in the next 6 months, they'll delay. We'll have to continue to come back. This is the battle of this epic struggle of our times. And if we win it, it shows tremendous people power, defeating, massive mega corporations who are trying to grab incredible power. So join us.
I am thrilled to introduce Jim to round out our discussion. The man who is fighting the powers that be on the behalf of the powers that ought to be: consumers, working families, small businesses, farmers, environmentalists, and just plain folks.
What a joy to be here with my longtime cohort and co-conspirator Lori, and with Zephyr's doing such a terrific job on so many issues, and including her great run for office here, and Margaret now running for office down there, and Kevin and his terrific work. I'm happy to bring up the rear, and I'm sure by now you're ready to bring your rears up. So I'll be mercifully brief here. I just thank the organizers for allowing a scruffy Texas populace to come to church here in this center of erudition and enlightenment, and to be part of this gluten-free rabble-rouser, this free-range TPP palooza that we're having here tonight, and to be in the presence of you grassroots agitators for America's proud progressive values of economic fairness, social justice, equal opportunity for all people. That's actually what America stands for. We don't hear it enough, do we? But that is the creed of America: fairness, justice, opportunity for all. We progressives don't win fights this big or even smaller by going inside the chambers of legislatures, but by going to the countryside and rallying the outsiders to come inside. That's when we win. And that is what has been happening here, and that's why we're this far along with the great leadership of Lori and her team. 11 people, Lori and her staff of 11 people, drove the bastards to the wall in an impossible fight. As Kevin was saying, something that nobody even knew what the hell what was this thing. They didn't even know what it was. Yet we put it on the national agenda by bringing you good folks forward to get in the face of power. And that's what we've got to do more of. I come to you not merely from Austin, Texas, but from South Austin. We're a little more irreverent on the south side of the river over there. And our unofficial slogan is, we're all here because we're not all there. I think that's why we're all here tonight, is because we know that the corporate and political powers that be, excuse the redundancy there, are not at all there on grasping the essential, uniting theme that we're all in this together. In fact, they're as confused as goats on AstroTurf when it comes to trying to understand the essential power of that thought and the fact that that is what brings America together. And follow up on what Kevin was saying, I think that we are in another of those when in the course of human events moments that Thomas Jefferson wrote about a couple of hundred years ago. A moment in which the global corporate elites, with the entire Republican establishment, are engaged in a kleptocratic cabal with Barack Obama, with Rahm Emanuel, with the Daily Boys out of Chicago, with a covey of pusillanimous corporate Democrats. You know, some of our Democrats, let's be honest, are weaker than Canadian hot sauce when it comes to standing up to the powers that be in this country. And what we have in this just god-awful glob of global corporate gobbledygook is a shameful sneak attack on our people's sovereignty, our right to be a self-governing people, as these good folks have explained here tonight, how this completely undermines that very basic concept that creates America itself. And the junta is using every tool, every weapon that they have in their arsenal to overthrow our people's rights. They're using the bully pulpit of the presidency itself. They're using lies. They're using campaign cash. They're using their armies of lobbyists, their hokey impact reports, and their bought and sold academics. They're using more cash. They're using TV ads. They're using lies. They're using personal attacks. They're using bribery. They're using PR agents. Did I mention they're using lies? You know, they say in sex, and I don't know a whole lot about this. Chuck Zlotnick was trying to explain it to me earlier. They say that in sex, using a feather can be erotic, but using the whole chicken, that is just nasty. That is kinky, perverse. Well, these people are using the whole chicken against us. Well, now for the good news. The people of America are revolting, in the very best sense of that term. I'm a lucky duck in that I get to travel a whole lot. I've been just about every place that's got a zip code, including a lot of places to talk about this topic, and not just the safe havens of San Francisco or someplace like that, but down in Bakersfield, California, out in Texas, El Paso, for example, is out there recently, in Chicago, in Madison, in North Carolina, and elsewhere, and everywhere. The people are onto this. And if they're not onto it, it is very easy to explain it to them. You can see it in the polls. The polls are overwhelmingly in our favor right now. You can go to any chat and chew cafe in America and just sit on a stool and talk to the person next to it, and they will understand exactly what you're talking about here. And by they, I mean Republicans as well as Democrats and independents. You know, Lyndon Johnson used to say you can't make chicken salad out of chicken manure. He didn't say manure, but... But that's all they have to work with, as these good folks have explained to you here today. When anybody in America gets a whiff of what's in this thing, they just gag. When they hear who was at the table and who was not, they are revolted. When they learn about the fast-track railroad job that's been done on us, it just sets their hair on fire. And as Laurie indicated, there are 500 corporations sitting at the table doing the writing of drafts, commenting on it. They were inside. None of us were inside. None of us. There's an old saying that union folks will know that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And people get that. And so they're saying, don't TPP on me. That's become a slogan that is out there as well. So my message to you, and I'm sure you're wondering what it is by now, is that it's up to us. It's not up to Public Citizen, Global Trade Campaign. It's not up to the good folks here in the CWA and the other great unions that are fighting this. It's not up to the organizations. It's up to you and to me. We have to be the messengers carrying this way beyond our comfort level. We got to be talking about it in our churches, in our union halls, in the workplaces, in the Kiwanis clubs, assaulting people on the street if necessary, and filling them in on what the hell this is about. We've also got to be the confronters. We have got to get in the face of power. And that means knocking on the door and knocking on the head of your Congress critter. You don't have to go to Washington. They've got an office here. Go see them there. Take a little delegation, maybe a minister, maybe a small business person, maybe a teacher, maybe a student. Have a little delegation and just go and say, look, we are taxpayers. This is something that's going to affect us drastically, and we're watching what you're doing, and we want you to respond to us as well as to the bankers and as well to the corporate suites. We got to confront them, that we know what's going on, we know what they're doing, and we're seeing it, and we're not going to just lay over if they go against us. We're going to go against them. And then we've got to be the ralliers to pull all this together into something bigger than just individuals and individual groups, but a large coalition. That's already happening. It's already available out there. We just have to fill it out a little more. I'm saying to you that it's no longer enough for us to be progressive. We've been passively progressive forever. But the powers that be have turned radically regressive. So we've got to become aggressive. Getting right in their face. I was just a few years ago when Bernie Sanders first running for Congress. I was up in Vermont speaking Texan to him, and we had a rally at Montpelier at the state capitol. And after the rally, this guy came up and wearing a big old button, a great big one, and the best one I've ever seen. It said, "Wearing a button is not enough." We can't be a nation of button wearers. Got to be a little stouter than that. And this, as all the panelists have been saying here, is not just another issue. This is about our democracy, about whether we will be a self-governing people or we're going to turn it over to the transnational corporations. Cynics say, you people are fools. You can't beat the corporate powers. You can't overturn the corporate order. They've got all the money. They've got all the politicians. They've got the media. But as a friend of mine who's been a pioneer in the organic movement down in Texas said to me once, those who say it can't be done should not interrupt those who are doing it. And that would be you. Ordinary workaday people are the ones who are doing it. So we've got to step it up, do a little more, keep on keeping on, but just more so. I grew up in a small town north of Dallas in Texas on the Oklahoma border there, and I was a small guy, and so but I learned early on as a kid there that you should never hit a man with glasses. You should use something much heavier. And the heavy thing that we have is this room full of agitators, informed, people willing to stand up for the rights of all of us to be a self-governing people. TPP is not about trade, as Laurie went through. It's not about anything technical, really. It's about our values. Who are we going to be as a people? Who are we now? Are we willing to stand up? This is the watershed right here. And those values of economic fairness, social justice, equal opportunity for all are at risk. Who are we to be? And by the way, we need to be reminding people and Congress critters and the media and all of them out there that inequality, that's now a buzzword, in politics. Inequality. I'm against inequality. But inequality doesn't just happen. It's created by deliberate decisions like this. So Barack Obama cannot stand up and say, I'm against inequality, but I'm for the TPP. Well, the economists have a technical term for what's happening to us. It's called stealing. Woody Guthrie had that great song about outlaws, Pretty Boy Floyd the Outlaw. Had a verse in it said, "As through this world I travel, I see lots of funny men. Some will rob you with a 6-gun, and some with a fountain pen." It's the fountain pens who are doing the serious stealing today. And that's what we're up against. But we can beat them. We have been beating them. And we will beat them because of you. Yeah, I know the odds are against us. Just one quick little story. I was with our old friend Fred Harris out in Albuquerque recently, and we were sitting around a table doing some 12-ounce elbow bends there, and the topic turned to baseball, and then somebody mentioned Lou Gehrig, and this younger guy at the table said, "Lou Gehrig, who's Lou Gehrig?" We said, "Well, the New York Yankee, the Hall of Fame, terrific ball player, and he died young. He died of Lou Gehrig disease." And this guy said, "He died of Lou Gehrig disease?" So what are the odds of that? I don't know what I'm saying to you about that, but basically I'm saying don't hold back. We need you. We've got to organize, mobilize, harmonize, and do more. Most importantly, we've got to intensify this effort. I'll leave you with this thought. It's from Louis Grizzard, the late great Southern humorist, who said something once that we in the South have always known to be true, and that is there's a great big difference between being naked and being naked. Naked means you've got no clothes on. But naked, that means you've got no clothes on and you are up to something. So let's get naked together. Thank you very much. Thanks for what you're doing.